All right, y'all. So today we are going to talk about addressing muscle imbalances. So first off, in case you're new here, I really try and approach this from more of kind of a conceptual, principle-based approach than here's an exactly what to do approach. And the reality is, after having coached or worked with a few thousand people, you'll realize obviously the specifics of what fixes something will be very different from person to person, if something should even be fixed. So again, if I'm trying to hopefully help a few thousand people watching this video, there's nothing specific I can give that will help everybody. It would be the right advice for someone, the wrong for someone else. So I really kind of want to give some principles and concepts that hopefully thousands of different people can take thousands of different ways and apply them and hopefully find some benefit from them. In addition, every single morning I start off my day with answering questions from my forum on my app. And this was a member's question today. So I'm always trying to use this. That is an opportunity to expand on a concept obviously I know is of interest to someone else. So hopefully will be of interest to you as well too. So the first thing I want to bring up, I'm going to discuss one, do you really have something to fix in the first place? Then two, after I kind of go through some examples and concepts on that, I'm going to give you, I think, 3 different things that you can actually take and hopefully apply if you are trying to improve side-to-side imbalance. So one, the thing that I really want to address first is what makes you think you have an imbalance you need to fix. And some people might say, well, that's an obvious answer. I've got one arm bigger than the other. I've got one leg bigger than the other. I need to fix it. And I want you first and foremost to realize that nothing about your body is completely symmetrical. So again, the notion that everyone should have symmetry is just that. It's a notion. It's not like some sort of hard scientific fact. We are sided, so most everyone has a dominant side, not just your upper body, but your lower body. And as a result of not just being sided, but the way that things are, from the way cars work, the way we do, daily activities throughout our day, there's no symmetry really in our life. So again, because of that, because of the sided nature, because of perpetual habits that we have over time, we have no asymmetry, or we have no symmetry, through the 24 hours of a day that we exist. So why would it exist from a physique standpoint? So on top of that, one, just realize that symmetry doesn't exist. If you want some more examples aside from what I've seen, which is normal clients, even if you go to the Olympia level, on the Olympia stage, I bet there's not a guy on stage that has an arm or leg measurement exactly the same. And there are more than a couple guys that would have an arm measurement an inch different from side to side, more than a couple guys that would have thigh differences a half an inch to an inch. And again, I would make the argument that most of that is normal. So really take a minute to think, do I actually have something that's abnormal? Do I have something that's getting worse? I'm going to expand on that in a minute. That's probably the most important thing to ask yourself. Is it getting worse? Is the discrepancy that exists staying the same, or is it getting further apart? And that's one of the few things that I think you would want to address. So one, just realizing that I don't think it's unusual at all, in my professional opinion. It is normal to have a slight measurement side-to-side difference. It is normal to have a slight strength side-to-side difference. And it's normal to have a slight feel side-to-side difference. And so again, if those are the things that you're experiencing, I would argue most of the time, there's of course always exceptions, I'm not diagnosing shit from this video, I would say most of the time that is normal. So now, I kind of hinted at it before, what do you look for as far as something that's abnormal, something that you might actually want to fix? And that is all those things I said that I think are normal, if those discrepancies start to grow. So meaning, if over the course of a year or two, your arms are always half an inch apart, and then one day it just seems, so you're looking at it, it seems to get worse, and it seems to get worse. And then you look and all of a sudden your arms used to be a half an inch difference, and now they're an inch difference, and then they're an inch and a half difference. So that discrepancy growing, I think, is something to be concerned about. Strength differences getting different. So again, it's very common for people in upper body. It's not always as clear in lower body just because of semantics, the nature of training. But to train unilateral stuff. So it's very common in upper body stuff, if you're doing unilateral stuff, to maybe have a 1 or 2 rep difference from side to side, considering the same weight. And again, if that's always exists, I personally don't think that's a big deal. Now, again, if your strength discrepancy starts to spread, so meaning, was just with the same weight, 1 or 2 rep difference, and then it's turning into 2, 3, 4, 5 rep difference, or you can't even tolerate the same weight for a similar rep range, then that's a cause for concern. And then feel, same thing, sensation is important. But again, just realizing the nature of side-to-side dominance, some sides will just feel better than other sides, and that's normal. But if you start to have worse feeling on one side than it used to be, you start to lose feeling, lose sensation, you can't even feel the trained muscle at all, those are always things for concern. So first and foremost, if you're having that occurring, if you're having that discrepancy start to grow, there's nothing I can do. Even if you were in person, there might be some things that say, hey, let's do this, let's try that. If we're just kind of saying, the same as if someone had like a tooth issue and I was like, well, maybe try brushing your teeth and flossing first. And if something keeps getting worse, you got to go to the dentist. So same case here. If you do one or two little things on your own and it keeps getting worse, then you had to see a professional. So ideally some sort of maybe chiropractor, therapist, whatever, somebody with a license that can look at you, touch you appropriately, someone that can potentially take x-rays, someone that can take MRIs, depending on the nature of it. And the reality is those discrepancies getting larger, I would say very often could be some sort of nerve issue. So again, it could be related to something, a disc issue, some sort of impingement, entrapment, whatever, in which case you need to get with someone that is qualified to actually dig into that, look into that, properly diagnose it, and then think of a treatment plan. So let's say you're kind of in between, where one, it's like, oh, well, I hear what you're saying. I don't have this big discrepancy changing. It still kind of bothers me. Is there something that I could potentially do about it? So here's the things I think are safe for anyone to do about it. And this first one I'm going to say is probably the most important. And it's also the most simple, and it seems overly simple. But when you're doing both arms or both legs, bilateral movement, you're doing a bilateral exercise, at the same time, focus on the non-dominant side while you're doing it. Now that sounds really simple, but realize if you break down, how muscles work, you have a neuromuscular junction, and that's basically where your brain, communication from your brain and your muscles meet. And so realize unless you have some sort of acute injury, trauma, tissue trauma, whatever it is, I would argue rarely are imbalances on the tissue side, right? Like something's actually happening with the contractile tissue that's making it not work well. So where else does that leave it to be? It's on the brain side. I know that seems overly simple, do I just focus on the lagging side, the non-dominant side? How the hell is that going to fix anything? Well, realize when you acquire a new skill, when you learn how to write with your hand, when you learn a new skill in a day, when you improve something that's this coordination type thing, what changes? Something in your brain changes. You don't have to be a neuroscientist or a neurosurgeon to actually go in and change things in your brain. When you acquire a new skill and there's some sort of motor change, that is a brain change, and that can happen short term, that can happen long term. So the reality is if you're thinking about something different, if you're focusing on something different, again, with that non-dominant side, it's safe to say that you could potentially improve your ability to control that non-dominant side, improve something on the brain side of that neuromuscular junction. So again, if your left leg is the one that seems like it's lagging or small or whatever it is, you're doing squats, just literally think about your left leg more. Focus on your left leg more. Pay attention to things that are important. How is it on the ground? Am I really contracting my quad out of the bottom, if that's what I want to think about? And same thing, obviously, for the upper body and for the arms. And again, if it's something that can potentially improve on your brain side, that could maybe do it. And I think that's a very simple thing to do that can't really have a whole lot of negative ramifications as well, too. So that's probably one of the simplest and easiest tips that I can give that I found to be somewhat effective, and potentially if something can or should improve, that can do it. The next is if you actually want to work on things, sometimes I always say it's your ability to get to tissue that can be the limiting factor. So sometimes, again, I think most of the time it's still for brain stuff, but this can improve brain stuff. If you work on joints around the joint and muscle you're trying to bring up, that can help. So again, the example of quads, and this is a long video in of itself, which I'll get into at some point in time a little bit more, with things that, bodybuilders and meatheads are qualified to do themselves. But if you're working on your ability to train your quads, and let's say you're doing a squat, barbell back squat, front squat, safety bar squat, even a hack squat, basically load is coming through your feet, load is coming through what you've got on your back, and it's the ability of that load to get to the quad that is sometimes the limiting factor. So again, if your ankles and feet don't move well, you can sometimes have a hard time getting to your quads or doing the form right or doing it properly. And it's very common to have side-to-side differences in the way that your ankles and feet move. Same for hips. So again, this is a very broad thing, but if you're working on your quads, let's say your left quad doesn't grow as well, you don't feel it as well, take a look at your left ankle and your left hip. And if you work on control, mobility, so just some drills of actually moving your ankle joint, taking through different motions of plantar dorsiflexion, different types of rotation, pronation, supination, things like that. Same with hip flexion, extension, internal, external rotation. Take a look at that. See if you have a difference from side to side. See if it's very common, again, if maybe one of your feet or one of your ankles doesn't move as well, or you can't control it as well. So if you improve the joints around the joint and the muscle that you're trying to train, sometimes that can help your ability to get force from an exercise to that muscle. And so again, that's a broad one, but don't overthink it. I mean, literally, you don't have to be, again, a physiologist, kinesiologist, whatever, to understand, oh, well, what's all this kind of stuff? It's like, well, if you're working on something around your elbow, work on your hand and wrist. There's lots of motions that you can just spend time trying to improve. Work on your shoulder, and lo and behold, things at your elbow might improve. And lastly, I don't think it's ever bad to do more unilateral work. So again, it's more common on the upper body, but some people say, I have quad issues, ham issues, whatever, and they never do unilateral work. They never do just a single leg extension, single leg curl, single leg press, single leg squat variation, split squat lunge variations. So I don't think there's anything wrong with doing single leg stuff, and even potentially this is an approach. There's a whole bunch of different ones. I don't think it's a bad idea if you really do want to try and maybe narrow that strength discrepancy. Is start with your non-dominant side. So again, as simple as your left bicep is weaker than your right, prioritize it. So start with your non-dominant side, make sure it's very fresh, hit a number, you curl 40 pounds for 6, match that number with the right side. So again, even if you could do more on your right side, this is under the assumption that the reason that the discrepancy exists is there's lack of stimulus. So if you train one side to failure, the other side you train 1 or 2 reps short of failure, the argument is the non-dominant side will get more stimulus, and if stimulus is the actual lacking thing, that will help it to catch up. So again, I don't think that's a completely bad strategy. Nothing bad will happen from it. Arguably, you could just be limiting the rate of progress if that's really not the issue, if it's not lack of stimulus. But like I said, you could always go through any example I just gave of single side stuff. Start with your non-dominant arm. Make sure you're very fresh, very rested, so you can put a lot of time and effort and focus into it. And then whatever number you hit, match that number with your dominant side. And you can make the argument again, if it's the lack of stimulus, the lack of actually reps, weight, the whole reason you're exercising, just stimulus means working out, training, whatever you're doing to try and grow muscle. If it is lack of stimulus for whatever reason, that could potentially help it all catch up. So hopefully that helps. Like I said, that was a question coming from my app and my forum. And I know that obviously it seemed to help there. So hopefully it helps you all here as well. And as always, if you have not yet subscribed, please take a minute, hit that little subscribe button. It is greatly appreciated. Give me a little thumbs up. If you have any actual constructive criticism, please leave it below. If you have some non-constructive criticism and it makes you feel better about yourself, feel free to leave that below as well too. And as always, if you know that someone this would help, please share. I'm always trying to grow the channel and help more people, and that is greatly appreciated. But thank you for watching, and until the next video.